Morning. I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. I am Port of Seattle CEO Ted Fick. I'm here on behalf of the Port of Seattle and the Northwest Seaport Alliance to thank Senator Cantwell, U.S. Secretary Foxx, for the work to create the National Freight Strategic Plan, the Freight Map for Success. We may be rooting for different teams today, but we agree that we have one national vision for competitive, multimodal freight systems. The health for our infrastructure is what drives our economy, jobs, our ability to export locally, regionally, and nationally. The need for a unified strategy is the reason for the ports of Seattle and Tacoma teaming up to create the Seaport Alliance. We are the third largest international gateway in the nation. The last mile connections to our facilities, like an at-grade railroad crossing in Puget Sound, are part of a national system. This enables American exporters in the U.S. heartland to reach markets to Asia. This strategic plan will help us make targeted investments to improve freight performance. It will help promote collaboration, like partnership between the Port of Seattle and the City of Seattle to designate a heavy haul corridor, which is a critical part of our local infrastructure that carries national significance. A well-performing system will support jobs locally and key export industries like agriculture, fishing, and manufacturing. We can't wait any longer for smart freight solutions. And now it is a pleasure to introduce Secretary Anthony Foxx, who I met on my very first day as the CEO of the Port of Seattle, because he was making a $20 million investment in the port's competitiveness. I deeply respect him for his understanding of local issues as a former mayor. Let's give him a big welcome.
Good morning, soon to be afternoon. I want to thank you, Ted, for introducing me, and it's great to see you. As a native of North Carolina, I won't talk about the competition that will start in about an hour, but I will focus on what brings us together today, as you said, Ted, which is freight. Before I do that, though, I want to thank Senator Cantwell. Senator Cantwell was here to launch this effort with my predecessor, Secretary Ray LaHood, and she continues to be a leading voice in Congress for having a national freight strategy and on safety. I will add parenthetically that my predecessor, Secretary LaHood, has often referred very kindly to the senator as Senator Freight for her steadfast focus and work on pushing forward this department to create a national freight plan. I also want to thank Senator Murray. She couldn't be here today, but her presence is felt because she's also a leader on this issue. And in fact, this summer, she joined Senator Cantwell in introducing freight legislation that was passed as in part on our department's recommendations. And today I'm here to say that we've taken another step to strengthen the freight system here in Washington and across the country. But let me say this, our freight network is one of the greatest legacies in our country. There are millions of Americans who wake up in the morning and go to jobs operating trucks, trains, aircraft, ships, and barges. There are 44 million jobs directly supported by our freight system. And our freight workers do more than ensure goods move successfully from one point to another. What they really do is move our economy. The job they do gives us a competitive advantage over our global competition. The cost of moving goods in America is one of the lowest in the world. This is part of what's made us an exceptional economic power across the world. But America is not just exceptional because of what previous generations did. We are exceptional because every generation picks up the mantle from where the last generation left off and carries it forward. And when you look at some of the challenges we face as a country, it becomes clear that now more than ever we cannot be lulled into sleep by the boldness and sacrifices of past generations. Our freight infrastructure should be as good as our workers are and as our businesses are. Today, however, the sad state of infrastructure in our country is underperforming against those generational accomplishments. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and we are making matters worse by underinvesting in it. I'll add that if delays seem bad today, we've taken a forecast into the next 30 years when we'll have 70 million more people. The global marketplace is vastly more complicated today than it was 20 years ago, but it will be even more complicated in the future. We're expecting to see 65% more trucks on the road over the next 30 years. And so our systems have to adjust and adapt, and we have to prepare those systems for that future. That's why we need to make every effort to understand how investments in our infrastructure will help keep us the #1 economy in the world. So today, we are releasing a draft National Freight Strategic Plan that will allow us to prioritize the needs of freight in a way that has never been done before. It takes a balanced approach by solving our freight challenges, taking into account all forms of transportation. And as part of this, we are releasing a map that shows us where we should be focusing our attention on improving our national freight system. Our plan lays out some of the challenges that need to be overcome. This is the map over here. It's just helping us see it. And for the first, let me talk about why this is so critical. I mentioned before we're going to have 70 million more people in this country over the next 30 years. They're going to be expecting to get places too. They'll expand the scale of our economy and drive a 40% increase in freight movements overall. Our ports will need to handle twice as many containers. Air freight is expected to triple. Multimodal shipments are expected to more than double. And our freight system will not just be handling higher volumes, but playing an even larger role in supporting our businesses. Our freight system will be handling double the number of imports and exports than it does today. And our plan shares the good news that safety in the freight transport sector has been improving. But it also tells us we need to continue setting the bar higher, particularly as America becomes a world leader in energy production. We have a system, unfortunately, that is riddled with bottlenecks. We have outdated bridges, overburdened highways, underdeveloped first and last mile connections. We were just talking about some of them right here in the Seattle area. Connections to our ports and backed up rail crossings. All of these are creating situations where freight deliveries are getting delayed for hours at a time, even days in some cases. These bottlenecks are also there in how we plan and develop and finance projects. That said, we do have some proposals for how to make these bottlenecks disappear. And for now, I'll just name 3. First, we can take aggressive steps to accelerate technologies that can change the game both for safety and efficiency. Second, we can work throughout government and the private sector to expedite project delivery and get better results for our communities and our environment. And third, and this is critical, we can make upgrading our infrastructure and modernizing our freight network a national priority. We do this by identifying areas of weaknesses in our system. Then we make targeted investments, as we have through our Tiger program, to strengthen those weaknesses. We propose doing exactly this in our Grow America Act, and Senators Cantwell and Murray have put forward a version of this proposal in the Senate. So I will continue to work with the senators and every member of Congress to pass a bold infrastructure package that accentuates our nation's freight challenges and the opportunities ahead of us. This is a bill that helps lead us to a system where our roads and rails and airports and waterways and ports are linked seamlessly. And I'll make just one more point. The National Strategic Freight Plan we're putting forward defines the problem and presents some good solutions. But if we're being honest, I think most of us knew all of these problems already existed. And I think there is also agreement across the aisle that a national focus on freight is a necessity for our country. So I'll be blunt and say that I do hope this strategic plan becomes not just something that sits on the shelf, but becomes an action plan for America. Otherwise, it's like receiving a prescription from a doctor, but not getting it filled. I also want to remind folks this plan is a draft, so it's open for public comment. And so my message to the American people, that is business owners, freight operators, local officials, folks in tech, academic, and research communities, as well as ordinary Americans, is to let us know what you think. And let's start the dialogue that galvanizes more movement so we can get this plan moved into action and to get America moving again. And with that, I want to introduce someone who literally has been a champion of this national freight plan, someone who really urged our country to take this seriously and will continue fighting to make sure that these plans turn into action, and that is Senator Maria Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Well, actually, I appreciate good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank Mindy Lindquist from Senator Murray's office for being here. It's great to be here with Mayor Murray, Port of Seattle Director Ted Fick, and Renee Trueblood from Interstate Distribution. I especially want to thank Secretary Foxx for coming to Seattle to announce a national strategic freight plan. No city better typifies the challenges we face in having a strong transportation economy and export of goods made right here in Washington than the Seattle area when it comes to the challenges of exporting it and also running into congestion. So, Washington State is really at the forefront of multimodal freight. The ports of Seattle and Tacoma have already moved more than 2.4 million cargo containers this year. And these goods move to product markets all over the country and outside the United States. 25% of our jobs depend on our export economy. And so when freight product is delayed, it hurts our competitiveness. So the State Department of Transportation estimated that 20% delay in truck congestion in Washington State could result in the loss of $3.3 billion of economic activity and over 27,000 jobs in our state. So that is why we wanted to see a comprehensive national freight strategy. By working on this plan, which has been underway now since 2010, we have been working with stakeholders at the state and national level and a freight recommendation board to make sure that the idea of why freight can't wait was ingrained in the ideas of our national leaders. I joined Secretary LaHood in 2012, not far from this location, to announce that national freight panel, and their recommendations are what is the basis now of this freight plan, which says include all modes of transportation. Now we're gathered here because we have the final recommendations, and the Secretary has outlined this strategic plan, a plan that will make corridors like I-5 part of a national freight strategy. But it will do more than just identifying places like Seattle and Tacoma as gateways. It will also say that other parts of our transportation system should be prioritized as well. That rail corridors are part of the transportation system, that multimodal is part of the transportation system, and that agricultural products that help us move Washington products are also part of that strategic transportation corridor. This is so important to us because we cannot afford to lose business to foreign competitors. We must ensure that both Washington farmers and manufacturers, as well as other American businesses, have speedy access to 95% of the world's consumers who are outside the United States. A recent report by the Department of Energy found that we risk losing trillions of dollars in business because we lack the infrastructure investment in our waterways and ports to continue to remain competitive. Well, and it doesn't just stop here in Seattle. Chicago, for example, is a massive rail hub for the United States and the destination for much of the cargo that's unloaded here in Seattle. And yet congestion is so bad in Chicago that it takes a freight train longer to get through the city of Chicago than it takes for the train to get from Seattle to Chicago. That has to change. And that's what we're doing right here today. We're going to, in a few minutes, walk out to Lander Street, an example of a corridor that needs to be improved to make sure that cargo gets off of I-5 and onto the ships so it can get to its destination in expedient time. We have here on Lander Street 60 trains a day that can also delay that truck traffic, to say nothing of just the serious traffic congestion of commuters trying to get to and from work. So if we don't invest, we lose out to foreign competitors. The Canadian government has targeted the Asian Pacific corridor for its strategic growth, and they have invested $1.4 billion to speed up their movement of freight throughout Canada. So companies like Interstate, that Renee is going to talk about in a minute, rely on our ports for their competitiveness. Her trucks move from the distribution centers in Puget Sound, the retail stores throughout the country. So if it's cheaper for somebody like IKEA to ship through the Port of Vancouver because trucks get stuck here on Lander Street, we will eventually lose jobs. So by developing a national freight plan, we can help break through on the important issue of economic competitiveness. We can say that we need to invest in the transportation corridors like outlined by the Secretary so that they become key components of our transportation plan. I will note that Senator Murray and I support a transportation package that passed the United States Senate and is now awaiting House action that also funds the strategic freight priorities that the Secretary has outlined. So we know this. Freight can't wait. We need to be competitive. If we want our products made in Washington State to get to the customers in a timely fashion, we need to make sure that the infrastructure improvements are made. That's where we're so happy that the Secretary decided that Seattle was a great place to announce the strategic freight plan, because we know that this strategic freight plan will help us keep jobs in the Pacific Northwest. And now I'd like to turn it over to the mayor, who always has infrastructure priorities top of mind. And thank you for coming down and prioritizing why Lander Street is so important to the Washington economy and here in Seattle. He's been an advocate for Lander Street all the way back to his days in the state legislature. So Mayor Murray, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you, Secretary Foxx, for coming to Seattle and for your partnership with local governments, and particularly with the city of Seattle. I also want to welcome you back to watch our Seahawks yet again beat your Panthers. Now, having said that, that was just a joke. We look forward to working with you in the future. The National Freight Strategic Plan is critical for this growing nation and for our growing economy here in the city of Seattle. Last year, Washington State completed its statewide freight mobility plan, and really the state has been a leader for many years in freight mobility. In Seattle, we are in the process of improving our own freight corridors. Our population is going to increase by 70,000 people, and, let me rephrase that. Our population has increased by, I'm going to get the numbers right, 70,000 people over the last 5 years, and 63,000 jobs over that same period of time. We're expected to grow by another 120,000 people over the next 20 years. This is a city and this is a state that, like no other place in the nation, depends upon freight. Our ability to get this right is incredibly important. Tomorrow, the City Council will pass the Heavy Haul Network, a plan that we worked on with the port and with local businesses and the Northwest Seaport Alliance, so that we can make the neighborhood we're in right now function for businesses, function for freight. Our heavy haul network will connect nearby rail yards and growing trucking facilities, allowing imports from around the world to safely and efficiently reach their local, regional, and national destinations. Seattle is also developing its first freight master plan. I think sometimes lost in the discussion about transportation in Seattle is the fact that we've stepped up over the last 2 years to make sure that freight is as important as any other mode. So we look forward to working with the Secretary, with the federal government, with Senator Cantwell, with our partners at the port, and most importantly, with our businesses. And it's my honor to introduce Renee Trueblood from one of our great local businesses, Interstate Distributors. Renee.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here today to represent the trucking industry Interstate is Washington's largest trucking company, and we help support more than 2,000 families nationwide who are able to support themselves based on their jobs in the transportation industry. And I really have to thank my chauffeurs for bringing me here today. Gary and Joe, who are here in the room, who brought me here on time and safely, two of our honored interstate drivers based out of our Tacoma location. And it's interesting, to get here on time, Gary and Joe said, you know what, Renee, we better leave at 8 o'clock. We left Tacoma at 8 o'clock in the morning in order to be here by 11:45. They wanted to make sure their precious cargo got here on time. And they told me about the congestion problems that exist down here on Lander Street, and especially on a day when there's a Seahawks game. So we forget, we just jump in our cars and, leave a little extra time. But I experienced it firsthand today, watching how long it takes to get the truck ready to leave the yard, for the computers to boot up, to be able to merge on and off of on-ramps safely. It takes a lot longer to do that. So thank you both. I appreciate you getting me here safely as well. It was a reminder in the congestion, even at 8 o'clock in the morning on I-5, the impatient cars, because they're frustrated with the congestion we have here, who start to dart in front of a truck. And that's one of the most important things about this plan. I want to thank Senator Cantwell and Secretary Foxx for their leadership on this, because safety is first at Interstate, and congestion causes accidents. And we want to make sure that the motoring public and our drivers get home safely every night. We're really proud at Interstate that we were named last year the 3rd safest fleet in North America. But what's interesting about that award is number 1 and number 2 were Canadian companies. It was North America. And remember that trucks flow freely between Canada and the United States. And so the point that the senator made about we have to keep our ports competitive is very important, because otherwise that freight goes into Canada and those Canadian trucking companies will take that freight. The other important thing I have to say about this freight plan is making sure that we are committed to the environment as well. When trucks are sitting in congestion and idling, that's not good for the environment. It's not good for our drivers who run out of time. They're only allowed to drive 11 hours a day. It's not good for their health to be sitting in congestion like that. So I invite you all to join me outside and see Gary and Joe's trucks. We brought one of our liquid natural gas trucks here today, and it'll give you just a really good sense of what it takes to move around our freight corridor, and I'm so pleased about this strategic freight plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming, and unless anybody has any immediate questions, we're going to go outside and look at Lander Street and see a tour of why congestion here is so problematic for moving product to the corridor from I-5. So thank you.